What do you think Donald Trump, your old friend Trump's gonna do tomorrow morning?
Listen, I don't subscribe to the politics of fear, hate, or division. It doesn't work. It did not work in New York, it didn't work in Virginia, and it didn't work in New Jersey. You know, listen, as the Attorney General of the state of New York, we've been responding to these unlawful, illegal, and unconstitutional executive orders, and we've been winning. And at the end of the day, I look forward to working with his mayoralty and responding to any threats that come from Washington, D.C. My job is to protect New Yorkers.
And we have an update to the criminal cases of former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. The Justice Department is denying claims from the two, alleging that the prosecutor who pursued their cases was unlawfully appointed and needs to be removed. James and Comey argue Lindsey Halligan had no authority to bring their individual indictments. Comey is accused of obstruction and lying to Congress, while James is accused of mortgage fraud. Both of them have pleaded not guilty.
So we're back talking about Letitia James. She is definitely in full panic mode. You can tell instead of fighting the case, she's just trying to stop the fight itself. And we talked about this before with the gag order, but obviously there were more desperate grabs to stop this case from continuing. Her lawyers filed a motion arguing that the prosecutor, Lindsey Halligan, isn't even allowed to be there. Not that the evidence is wrong or not that she's innocent. They're arguing that the lawyer, I guess, wasn't properly hired. That's like showing up to court for a murder charge and saying, Your Honor, you can't convict me because the bailiff clocked in late.
The case of former FBI Director James Comey and the case of New York Attorney General Letitia James, same prosecutor, same district, the Eastern District of Virginia, but both are making the same argument as they go down their parallel runways. They're arguing that Lindsey Halligan, the U.S. attorney, was not lawfully appointed to the position by the Trump administration. The Department of Justice overnight has argued that Halligan was, in fact, lawfully appointed. They make a series of arguments as to why, including a new designation from the Attorney General herself, Pam Bondi, that Halligan is her special prosecutor for these cases, the Comey and the James case. And that's when these two jets hit on the same runway for a short while, because they're going to join forces in an argument over this matter of whether Halligan is lawfully appointed in a hearing November 13th.
Lindsey didn't just respond, she came back swinging. Her reply was serious. Line by line, she dismantles every excuse Letitia's team tried to throw at the wall. Her desperation is on full display here. Every motion, every technical argument feels like a frantic attempt to stop the clock rather than prove innocence. If this case was baseless, and she loves saying it,
No fear. Because I believe that justice will rain down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Preach.
she wouldn't need to hide behind process and procedure. She'll welcome her day in court, but instead her team keeps inventing new ways to dodge it. Filing after filing, stalling after stalling. It's like watching someone frantically patch holes in a sinking ship while insisting it's unsinkable. She's not really fighting for justice anymore. She's really just fighting for survival. And that tells you everything you need to know about how serious this really is. So like I said, they tried to say that, well, Halligan wasn't hired properly to do this. And obviously the situation with James Comey as well, they put them both together because, again, they're trying to frame their argument as some grand constitutional violation. So Lindsey Halligan responds by pointing out the obvious, even though Letitia James and James Comey try to frame their argument as some grand constitutional violation. Everyone agrees U.S. attorneys are inferior officers. Their appointment is supposed to be handled by the Attorney General. That's literally how the system works.
Because the U.S. attorneys are inferior officers and subject to the control of Pam Bondi, who is an officer, ultimately the president, Congress may also vest in law the power to appoint U.S. attorneys to the president alone. So lots of rules and backgrounds. We've got the Vacancies Reform Act. Attorney generals can appoint things, walking us through the statutes that we saw, and Congress has authorized a lot of this.
So right out the gate, Halligan is like, nice try. You just described how the law is supposed to function. And that's how you realize what this motion really is. It's a Hail Mary dressed up as a legal brief. It's the classic, if I can't win, maybe I can stall strategy. It's the legal equivalent of pulling a fire alarm because you're losing the game. Halligan keeps going. She lays out how the Attorney General absolutely has the authority to appoint a U.S. attorney when the office is vacant. There's only one exception. If the Senate already rejected that person. That's it. One rule, one exception. And guess what? The Senate hasn't even voted on Halligan's appointment yet. So Halligan is basically saying, law is satisfied, end of discussion, case closed. her appointment is valid. Letitia's team tried to twist another statute in there as well, claiming that the district court can only appoint a temporary U.S. attorney after the attorney general's time has run out. But Hannigan flips that right back at them, saying that the law created two valid paths, one for the attorney general, one through the court. They run parallel, meaning both are legitimate. There's no conflict unless you make one up. It's like watching someone lose an argument and then go, well, actually, my imaginary version of the law says otherwise. And here's another stall attempt from Letitia James. Her lawyers pulled out this trick called the 120-day rule. They argued that once Attorney General appoints someone, that appointment expires after 220 days, period. As if there's some invisible countdown clock in the DOJ's office like a legal time bomb. But Halligan claps back. She says that each appointment starts its own 120-day timer. Each new appointment resets a clock. That's how it's always worked. She even points out that Congress intentionally does not limit the Attorney General to one-time only appointment. Lawmakers didn't want to handcuff the Justice Department or force courts to play musical chairs every few months. What she's trying to say, this isn't a use it or lose it rule. The Attorney General can reappoint someone if the office is still vacant. That sounds like common sense to me. Then she brings out the receipts. She notes that the government has repeatedly done this before, reappointing interim U.S. attorneys after 120 days pass, and those appointments are upheld. One senator even predicted this exact thing, saying that because Congress reinstated the same language it had before, the Attorney General can continue making appointments. This isn't a loophole. This is literally how the law is designed to work. Meanwhile, Letitia James' team is out there trying to argue that 120 days is some sacred number from the Constitution, like Moses came down from the mountain carved into a tablet. It just doesn't make any sense.
Now, they rely on these subsections, which states that a person appointed as U.S. attorney under this section may serve until the qualification or the expiration of the 120 days. They say, what are you talking? She complies with this fully. Senate has not confirmed her, and she has not been in there for 120 days. Nothing in the text explicitly or implicitly precludes Pam from making additional appointments after the 120 days. So she can go back, oh, your term's expired. Guess what? You're reappointed, Lindsey.
Hannigan continues to dig deep. She reminds the court that there's a few things more executive than prosecuting crimes. Article 2 of the Constitution gives the power squarely to the president and his appointment officers. And Article 3, that's judiciary, requires the courts to stay out of it.
Courts should strive to avoid, not embrace, these inter-branch conflicts. This raises serious separation of powers issues. Now, this case illustrates the dangers right here. Presumably because the previous interim U.S. attorney was appointed by the Eastern District, those judges on their own, sua sponte, transferred the present motions to this court. Other courts have felt compelled to transfer similar cases, and courts should avoid an interpretation that would routinely put themselves in an uncomfortable position. You're not supposed to be in the middle of the conflict. Instead, consistent with the Constitution and the Appointments Clause and the separation of powers, Congress gave the courts only a narrow but important role of making the seat filled when political branches ultimately fail to act.
In short, Halligan is saying this isn't your lane, and it sure isn't Letitia's. A reminder that you can't just twist separation of powers just because you are scared of prosecution. Now think about what that means. The Attorney General has clear legal authority. The Constitution supports it. In this case is valid. And instead of facing the charges, Letitia James and James Comey are wasting the court's time arguing over paperwork like kids claiming a hall monitor can't give them detention because their pen ran out of ink. And here's where it gets really crazy and frustrating. The mainstream media hasn't touched this at all. You're not seeing this breakdown on CNN. You're not going to see this in MSNBC. So-called law and order pundits on the big networks are quiet. They run every headline about all the other legal battles, either what's going on with Trump or with other politicians. But when it comes to one of the power players in the progressive left, that person's on the ropes, and it's like radio silence because this story obviously is not going to fit the narrative and that certain people in the system are untouchable. When we look at Hannigan's filing, it looks like it's pretty logical, and that's what makes this moment so dangerous for Letitia James. She's been running the accountability show for years. She's made her career off calling other people corrupt, but now the spotlight has swung back in her direction, and suddenly she's allergic to transparency. The truth is, this case isn't just about one motion to dismiss. It's about whether the system can actually hold someone accountable or if justice only applies when it's convenient. Letitia James tried to stop her own trial by arguing that prosecutors shouldn't exist, and Hannigan responded by basically using common sense. The law is clear, the appointments is valid. Unless a judge decides to perform legal gymnastics, this case is going forward in January. The bigger question is why enough people are not talking about this. Unless you're on YouTube, no one is talking about this on mainstream TV. I guess stories like this expose how fragile equal justice really is, how fast the defenders of the law become its biggest critics when they're the ones under the microscope. It's not just irony, it's just pure hypocrisy. But we will continue to follow this case, and the trial that's going to start in January is going to be a very crazy time, especially for Letitia James. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comments below. Thank you for taking time to watch this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.